Have you ever noticed how you can finally get the thing you've been wanting for months? Maybe it's a new phone, a promotion, a relationship. And for a few days, you feel amazing. You walk differently. You smile more. You think, this is it. This is what I was missing. And then 2 weeks later, it's just your phone, just your job, just your partner sitting across from you eating cereal. And suddenly your brain is whispering, okay, what's next? We've been taught that happiness lives somewhere in the future, in the upgrade, in the next level, in the version of you that finally has everything together. But here's the strange psychological twist. Happiness doesn't actually come from getting more. It comes from seeing what's already there. And once you understand why that happens, you'll never look at your daily life the same way again. Let me show you something your brain is doing without you even realizing it. There's a concept in psychology called hedonic adaptation. It sounds technical, but it's actually very simple. Your brain is designed to normalize everything. You win the lottery, give it a year, your emotional baseline drifts back toward normal. You move into your dream apartment. After a while, the walls just become walls. Your brain adjusts because, from an evolutionary standpoint, it had to. If our ancestors stayed euphoric about finding berries, they'd stop searching. If they stayed devastated forever after a loss, they couldn't survive. So the brain calibrates. It levels. The problem is, this leveling makes us chase. You think the next achievement will permanently raise your happiness level, but your brain quietly resets the bar. It's like trying to fill a bathtub with the drain open. And so we run on what I call the when-then treadmill. And when I get that job, then I'll relax. When I find the right partner, then I'll feel secure. When I make more money, then I'll finally be happy. But the then keeps moving. Psychologists like Martin Seligman, one of the founders of positive psychology, spent decades studying what actually predicts long-term well-being. And over again, it wasn't external upgrades that created sustainable happiness. It was meaning, connection, and appreciation. Not accumulation. Appreciation. And that's where things get interesting, because appreciation does something radical to your brain. When you intentionally notice what you already have, your health, your friendships, the fact that you woke up this morning, you interrupt adaptation. You force your brain to re-see what it has normalized. Think of it like this. Imagine walking into your home after a long vacation. For a moment, everything feels fresh. Your couch looks cozy. Your bed feels luxurious. Your kitchen smells familiar in a comforting way. Nothing changed, but your perception did. Gratitude is like giving your brain a tiny vacation from taking things for granted. And neuroscience backs this up. Brain imaging studies have shown that practicing gratitude activates regions linked to dopamine and serotonin, the same neurotransmitters involved in pleasure and mood regulation. In other words, appreciation literally changes your brain chemistry. But here's the deeper layer most people miss. Appreciating what you have doesn't mean settling. It doesn't mean killing ambition or pretending you don't want more. It means learning how to stand still long enough to feel the life you're already living. We often confuse more with better, but psychologically, they're not the same. Let me tell you a story. Imagine two people who both make $70,000 a year. One of them constantly compares themselves to people making $100,000. They feel behind, slightly inadequate, always almost there. The other compares themselves to where they were 5 years ago, struggling, uncertain, barely scraping by. They feel proud, grateful, motivated, same salary, different lens, and the lens is everything. Our brains are comparison machines. Social comparison theory tells us that we evaluate ourselves relative to others. And in the age of social media, you're not just comparing yourself to your neighbors, you're comparing yourself to the highlight reels of millions of people. That's like judging your behind-the-scenes footage against someone else's movie trailer. Of course, you'll feel lacking. But appreciation shifts the comparison inward. Instead of asking, do I have as much as them? You start asking, do I recognize how far I've come? And that question feels different in your chest. And there's also something beautifully paradoxical here. The more you appreciate what you have, the less desperate you feel. And ironically, the more capable you become. Desperation narrows your focus. It puts your nervous system in a subtle state of threat. I don't have enough. I'm not enough. Your body reacts as if something is missing, but appreciation signals safety. Right now, in this moment, I'm okay. And when your nervous system feels safe, you think more clearly. You connect more deeply. You create more freely. In other words, gratitude isn't passive. It's stabilizing. And stability is powerful. Philosophers have been circling this idea for centuries. Even the Roman Emperor Marcus Aurelius wrote in his journal, which later became Meditations, about focusing on what is within your control and appreciating the present moment. Imagine being the most powerful man in the world and still reminding yourself not to take your own breath for granted. Why? Because human nature hasn't changed much. We still assume happiness is one promotion away. But here's a question that might feel uncomfortable. If you can't appreciate what you have now, what makes you think you'll appreciate more later? Your brain doesn't magically become grateful when your bank account grows, it just recalibrates. There's also a subtle identity shift that happens when you practice appreciation. Instead of seeing yourself as someone constantly striving toward happiness, you begin to see yourself as someone who already has access to it, and that changes your posture in life. You start savoring small moments: sunlight through a window, laughter during a mundane conversation, the quiet satisfaction of finishing a task. These aren't fireworks, they're candles. But candles, lit consistently, warm a room. And here's something deeply human. When you appreciate what you have, you become easier to be around. Think about it. Who feels lighter to sit next to? The person who is always dissatisfied, scanning for what's missing, or the person who can say, honestly, I'm really grateful for this. Gratitude softens people. It reduces envy. It reduces resentment. Studies have linked it to stronger relationships, better sleep, and even improved physical health. And it makes sense. Chronic dissatisfaction is stress. Chronic stress wears down your body. Appreciation, on the other hand, is a signal of sufficiency. And sufficiency is rare in a culture built on upgrades. Now, I know what some of you might be thinking, but what if my life genuinely isn't where I want it to be? That's valid. Appreciation doesn't deny pain. It doesn't ignore injustice. It doesn't silence ambition. It simply says, even within imperfection, there are anchors. You can want growth and still recognize stability. You can pursue change and still acknowledge blessings. These are not opposites. In fact, research on resilience shows that people who can find even small sources of gratitude during hardship recover faster emotionally, not because their problems disappear, but because their perspective widens. When you only focus on what's missing, your world shrinks to that gap. When you include what's present, your world expands. And expansion feels like breathing. Let me bring this back to something very simple. Tonight, when you plug your phone into charge, pause for a second. Think about the fact that you have electricity, a bed, a roof, access to information, people you can text. Your brain will try to dismiss it. Yeah, everyone has that. No, not everyone does. The fact that something is common doesn't make it insignificant. The sun rises every day. That doesn't make it boring. Happiness isn't hiding in your next purchase. It's hiding in your perception. It's in the way you taste your coffee instead of gulping it, in the way you notice the friend who always checks in the way you recognize your own quiet strength for surviving things no one applauded you for. Appreciation turns ordinary survival into quiet triumph. And the beautiful part? It's trainable. The more you practice noticing what's already here, the more your brain builds pathways around sufficiency instead of scarcity. You slowly move from what am I missing to what am I overlooking? That question alone can change a life. So maybe happiness isn't a mountain peak you climb once and conquer. Maybe it's more like adjusting the focus on a camera. The landscape was always there. You just sharpened the lens. And if this idea resonates with you, I'd love for you to try something small today. Not a huge life overhaul. Just one moment of deliberate appreciation. Then come back and tell me what shifted, even if it was subtle. Because sometimes the biggest psychological breakthrough isn't getting more. It's finally seeing enough.